Okay, our second of two recordings. We just covered the 6 dimensions of professional behavior and techniques to provide constructive criticism. This recording will cover strategies to make calls professionally and recognizing the role of conflict in team development. Okay, so let's do it. Strategies for professional phone calls. All right, great stuff here, folks. I use these strategies every day in my own business. Simple things we can do to make sure that our recipient feels that our conversation looks like this versus this. Number 1, go into it with a mini agenda. Know what you're going to say. I always have a notebook or a post-it next to me, and I scratch down my key ideas. Now, I speak for a living, folks, and I still feel so strongly about having an agenda. Have a go-to, because you get wrapped up in the conversation or you get nervous and that agenda goes out the window. Okay, so have an agenda. End the call politely. I think as we build business relationships, people are more apt to answer the phone if they know that the conversation has brevity, meaning it has a purpose and it has an end. And that can be as simple as saying, "Thank you for your time today. I look forward to talking at our next meeting on such a date." Okay, people feel relief in ending the call politely, and also that's their last impression of you. So make sure that your vocal aspects, your paralanguage, is exhibiting that kindness and courtesy. Another item our text talks about is avoid the phone tag. Okay, instead of saying, "Hey, I will try you back again," be specific. Let them know, "I'm going to give you a ring at 10 a.m. tomorrow." Or "Call me back today between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m. where we can be a little bit more specific instead of this never-ending phone tag, okay? And honestly, if you tell someone, "I'm going to give you a ring tomorrow between 10 a.m. and 12 noon, and you try that number a couple times at the said time and they don't pick up, they are passively telling you they don't want to further that conversation. So I think there's also an unspoken language when we don't play phone tag either. Okay, last thing, leave complete messages. There's nothing worse than getting a voicemail message and there's no phone number, or the person's last name isn't there and you're uncertain how to reach them. So I'm going to walk you through a 3-point strategy, but I want to reiterate, leave a complete message. That means name, contact information is included. Now, I always open up a voicemail message with my name and contact information, and then I repeat it again at the end of the call. Because if this person needs to call me back, I want to give them at least 2 opportunities to write down or capture that content information. Okay, so the primary thing I want you to take from professional phone call strategies is the 3-point introduction. I use this daily in my work life. The 3-point introduction, okay? Number 1, you're identifying who you're calling, okay? Number 2, you're going to identify yourself and any relevant connection. "Hey, I bumped into you at this networking event," right? Something to understand where these worlds overlap. And then thirdly, a brief explanation. Now, I'm going to say before I go through this, the 3-point introduction works beautifully for voicemails as well, where you maintain the same strategy as well as content. And again, folks, okay, this 3-point introduction or using this as a voicemail, it often determines if people accept or decline or if they call you back. Because let's be real, we live in a world where phone calls are screened, okay? And based off that voicemail you leave, they may choose to or not to call you back. So we want to power pack that. Okay, so let me just give you a personal example of the 3-point introduction. I'm going to frame this up. As you likely know, I have my own small business where I do professional development, and I'm going to be contacting an HR representative who requested information at my website. So this introduction might sound like such. "Hi, I'm calling for Tom Johnson, Director of HR. Okay, that's my number 1. I'm identifying the person I'm contacting. And if I get Tom's number directly, great. But I also listed his title in the event that I have to go through a phone tree. Okay, so that's my first, identify the person you're contacting. My number 2, this is Liz Carlson. I received a request for information on some professional development training. Okay, so I identified myself and the relevant connection. So if I'm live with Tom, he's like, oh yeah, I requested information. Or if I'm leaving a voicemail, he's making that same connection. And then thirdly is a brief explanation of what you want. Now, I am all about being specific. Okay, so I might say in my third point, I just wanted to follow up, Tom, and potentially schedule a meeting for us to get together and see what professional development service I offer that would best align with your organization. Okay, so my brief explanation is I want to schedule a meeting, right? And here's why. And then again, if this is a voicemail, I would reiterate my name and my contact information. Again, this is Liz Carlson with Liz Carlson Professional Development. My phone number is, right? Or if this is a live conversation, this would be our pivot. And a pivot I actually use is, how can I help you, Tom? Tell me about the needs of your organization. Opening up or passing the baton to bring Tom into the conversation. So the 3-point introduction: identify the person you're contacting, identify yourself and any relevant connection, and then third, briefly explain. Okay, so that is etiquette surrounding professional phone calls. Again, just isolating the one technique in the chapter that I really feel is so prevalent and needed, but please read that section carefully because there's so much good in the text out of chapter 11. The fourth and final thing I want to note out of the chapter is taking a step back. There's tons of strategies in here, but I think there's a bigger concept we need to get our arms around first, and that is understanding the role of conflict and team development. Now, oftentimes we hear the word conflict and our shoulders touch our ears. We are immediately uncomfortable. In the workplace, we need to look at conflict as opportunity, as growth, as our ability to become better. If you work in a culture where you sit in a meeting and everyone's silent and nobody asks a question, nobody offers an alternative perspective, this likely means you have an unhealthy relationship with conflict. Whereas if you're sitting in a meeting now, let's contrast that, and everybody is having dialogue and they're saying, wait, explain that to me. Okay, can you clarify that? Or what about we look at it from this perspective? Or have we ever thought about it this way? That scenario of a meeting represents healthy conflict. Conflict is not screaming and yelling and blaspheming. Conflict is healthy dialogue, and frankly, it is your value. When two people always agree, one is unnecessary. And that quote absolutely holds true in the workplace. So we're going to look at conflict and team development using Tuckman's stages of group development. You will see this figure also in your textbook. The first stage of developing a team is forming. Okay, this is where members of a team are selected, meaning they're hired, or they kind of organically come together. Okay, you don't always get to select. This is where you're learning facts about your teammates, who they are. You're becoming acquaintances at this point. And the very seeds of trust, as you'll see in my image here, are being planted. Okay, we're deciding if we want to stay and grow with this team or if we're just simply stopping by. So this is the beginning of culture. The second step then is storming. And this is where problems start to arise. When you're forming, you're just getting to know each other on a very surface level. When we move into stage 2, storming, we will see more problems arise. We'll have different opinions, different ideas that conflict those of our teammates. This is called the storming phase because it's got to get worse before it gets better. And the key is in the storming phase, don't back down. Don't monitor. Don't succumb to groupthink. Share your ideas, but be just as willing and open to hear others and to be challenged and to think differently. This is, in essence, storming. The third phase then is norming, and that is where that conflict is becoming normalized. It's revered as positive. It's part of your culture. that you have lively discussions and debates and people ask the tough questions. And that's the beauty of this stage. Now we're making quality decisions. We're no longer just nodding and agreeing because we believe the group has come to a consensus on something, although we disagree with it. Norming is the opposite, where you're saying, okay, if I'm on board with this, I want to understand it. And please explain to me why this makes sense and how we overcome the following obstacles. And then our fourth and final stage of team development is performing. And this is where we are a well-oiled machine. We have a plan. We can implement it. We can manage it. We can delegate. We can share leadership roles. Because at the root of performing, there is trust. So teams don't get to this big, beautiful tree overnight. It takes time, and it takes challenge, and it takes discourse, frankly. And that is my call to ask you all to look at conflict as healthy. Now, not all organizations are there. And frankly, their cultures suffer when they are not. Okay, so let's look at some specifics as we wrap up this chapter. What do successful teams do well in terms of group behaviors? How does their team behave? Okay, so positive teams, positive cultures, they have rules and they abide by them, meaning there's that respect, that accountability to each other. Analyze tasks and define problems. Okay, and when I say analyze, they really think about things. Instead of just nodding and agreeing because, well, it looks like the boss is going with this route, we want to understand it, okay? We want to clearly define the problem and make sure that whatever the solution is actually fixing it. Contributing information and ideas. Successful teams do not censor. They share their ideas. There's trust. So an idea that doesn't proceed or falls flat, there's no shame in that. What's the word I'm searching for? Your value is not based on a question or an idea that falls flat. In fact, that is you asking the tough questions and thinking about it critically. Showing interest by listening actively. As I was describing those scenarios, look around your organization. How do people listen? Are they leaned in? Are they enthusiastic? Are they taking notes? That is an indicator of a strong team. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, encourage people to participate. When you are new to an organization, or if you're in a leadership role, make sure you are encouraging others. You know, instead of saying like, any questions? Okay, we're moving on. Say, I really want to hear from you. I'm going to go around the room and I want every person to share one question or something that isn't clear or an idea. We have to mine for that healthy conflict, okay? And then on the flip side, what do negative teams or cultures look like? They shut down the ideas of others. Oh, that's never going to work. They insult or criticize. They waste the group's time. If your leader calls a meeting just so you all nod and agree with their idea, that is a waste of everybody's time, and frankly, it's a low quality decision. Improper jokes and comments, that's another thing. It's great to have camaraderie and laugh together, but we need to make sure that our laughter or fun doesn't have an edge, that there isn't criticism embedded in it. Failing to stay on task, that's another indicator of teams that are not functioning. And then withdrawing or failing to participate. These are the folks that have quit but stayed, right? And that unfortunately is an indicator of a very unhealthy culture. So this is what we are aiming at, folks. This is the culture we desire, and that all centers on how we view conflict. Conflict is our value. It is our trust. Okay, so this was the second of 2 recordings. In recording 1, we talked about the 6 dimensions of professional behavior, as well as providing constructive criticism. In this recording, our second, we talked about strategy to make calls professionally and the role of conflict in team development. Thank you.